Hi, everyone. I'm Paul Fix, editor of the Hardwick Gazette and vice chair of the board of its parent organization that only publishes the Hardwick Gazette, Northeast Kingdom Public Journalism. And yes, I realize there's a conflict, and as soon as enough of you join the board, I'm happy to get off it. So we'll start there. Welcome to the Highland Center. The Highland Center and the Hardwick Gazette are co-sponsoring this event this evening, which came about because we saw the towns of Hardwick and Greensboro were both looking at options for effectively handling town meetings. And it turned out that people in Greensboro were in touch with Susan Clark, who will be our presenter tonight. Over there, raise your hand, Susan. And people in Hardwick were trying to track her down. And through the good graces of someone many of you know, our friend and yours, Gail Sangri, blessed us with a huge donation, which is allowing us to cover the cost of the food tonight. The Hardwick Equity Committee donated some money, and some Greensboro residents donated some money. So through the largesse of those people, thank you from all of us. So I think I'm going to turn this over to Susan, who has worked in a pilot project under a grant with Craftsbury and Peacham initially, and many towns since then, to help people think about what our goals are in trying to make or potentially making changes to town meeting. So, Susan, it's all yours.
Wonderful, thank you. Thanks. How's that for loudness? Yes? Okay, great, thanks. Thank you. Thanks to the Hardwick Gazette. Thank you for the community volunteers who organized this event and the donors, and to the Highland Center for hosting us. And especially thank you. Thank you for bringing your energy tonight to your town's democracy. I'm really honored to do anything I can for you in this key moment, both in Greensboro and Hardwick and wherever else you might be from, actually. So I'm going to introduce myself here in a minute, but first, I always love to know who's here. How many folks here are from Greensboro? Lots. All right, great. And how many from Hardwick? Oh, a bunch more. Holy cow, this is great. And how many from surrounding towns? Wow, it seems like people must have raised their hands 3 times. I mean, there's lots of interest here. That's wonderful. Okay. Well, so I am, let's see, what have we got here? I am Susan Clark. I'm a facilitator, I'm an educator, and I work with communities across the region on community sustainability and engagement. I live in Middlesex, which is, and by the way, my 4-hour-a-year job, I am town moderator in Middlesex as well. And I'm also a writer. I'm the co-author of Slow Democracy, where we tell stories of people across the United States and other countries using local democracy to make a difference. And I had so much fun on this one in the front here. I was a content provider. It's not technically a book. It's a comic book, as you saw, Freedom and Unity, put together by the Vermont Humanities Council and the Secretary of State's office and the Center for Cartoon Studies. So if you haven't seen that, be sure to get a copy. And I also co-authored All Those in Favor with UVM, a political science professor, Frank Bryan. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Professor Bryan, he's retired now, his data is the foundation of New England town meeting research for scholars really across the globe. And I just want to mention briefly, town meetings are notoriously difficult to study. It's one of their many annoying traits. Okay, we'll talk about multiple annoying traits, but you know, they're all kind of held around the same time. They're often in remote areas. You have to be there to collect the data. So political scientists would much rather study ballot box voting. It's so much easier. Just collect the data and analyze it. Town meetings are hard, and Professor Bryan broke the code by sending armies of students across the state to thousands of town meetings across the state for 30 years. He had them count attendance 4 times during the meeting, because you know the attendance changes during the meeting. How many men? How many women? Who spoke? Was it men or women? How many times did they speak? How long did they speak? What was the weather? Was there a meal? Was there childcare? And he analyzed this data in his book, Real Democracy. And his findings, honestly, really kind of shook the field of political science. So our book, All Those in Favor, is a Reader's Digest version. It doesn't have any of the regression analysis charts or anything like that. A much more simple version. So, all of this does make me a kind of a nerd about local democracy. What it doesn't do is make me any kind of an expert on what your towns should do. As a facilitator and as a town moderator, I have the utmost respect for your right to self-govern, for your right to make your own decisions. The real experts here are you and your neighbors, the people who live day to day in your communities, and what I hope we'll do here today with our time is help consider the values and the wisdom that each of you brings so that you can move forward together in constructive decision making. So if you didn't see the agenda, our plan for tonight is I'm going to start by presenting some information about opportunities for sort of both and thinking about local democracy. We're going to have some time to explore our own values, take some notes. We'll have some time for reflection before we break. At 6:30, we'll have a break for food and chat. I hope you'll stick around afterwards, because when we come back at 7 o'clock, I am going to give you all the answers. Okay, not really, but we will take a look at our Vermont system with its glorious and sometimes, as I said, super annoying traits. And I will share some creative and actually some very inspiring efforts from other communities. So does that sound okay for our agenda? Thanks. All right, great. Okay, so let me start out by saying I know that Greensboro, Hardwick have been through a lot lately. For starters, I know that Greensboro experienced a multi-year debate around your town hall and the rural edge housing proposal. Yes, we did hear about that in other parts of the state. I also know that Hardwick just had a revote on the Buffalo Mountain land issue at town meeting. And I'm not going to lie, my own town had a budget reconsideration vote this spring. So while each of our town's issues is unique to our towns, I will say that this is not an easy moment for any Vermont municipalities. Whether it's the demographic shifts caused by crises, they're causing those housing crises, causing crises in our schools, as we know, or 2 100-year floods in 3 years, right? Or we're struggling to retain staff and volunteers, or we've got uncertainty in federal funding. This is a really stressful time. And the linchpin, the crucible for dealing with this stress is our local democratic system. So it can be really hard under these circumstances to talk about local democracy. We feel this sense of vulnerability, of fierce protectiveness. This isn't just, close to home. This is home. But as piercing as these issues have been, and for tonight, I'm just going to ask each of us to leave our specific issues aside and kind of zoom out to the bigger picture. When the topic of the day is behind us, what kind of democracy do we want to live in? What do we want to leave our kids as democracy? Because that same proximity that makes us feel vulnerable right now, it also is an extraordinary opportunity to bring forth our community's best qualities. This is the power of local, this feeling that we're getting right now. Your collective strength together to make constructive improvement. And if we can just keep our eyes on the prize, this can be an exceptional opportunity to come together. And I'm going to say your work is really, really needed. I probably don't need to tell you this, but at the national level, Americans are experiencing one of the most polarized moments in history, and it makes it harder for all of us to love democracy. We're not seeing a lot of great modeling right now. At the national level, we've got public engagement that's increasingly inflamed by misinformation, social media. There's a wonderful term that Amanda Ripley uses in her book, High Conflict. She uses the term conflict entrepreneurs. Right? These are national partisans and media outlets. They make it their business to highlight our differences, to sow distrust, because they actually benefit from polarization. But there's more. In addition, even with our best intentions across the United States, some of our own democratic engagement structures work against us. And this is sad news, but conventional participation, I'm not talking about the New England town meeting that has power, but things like public hearings, which, by the way, is the most common method used to bring people together in a democracy, a public hearing. They've actually made things worse. Social scientists have been studying these since the 1960s, and they have a pretty bad track record. So these are some quotes from this public administration textbook. Conventional participation can be harmful to citizens. It tends to increase our feelings of powerlessness. It decreases political interest and trust in government and public spiritedness. It can actually increase polarization with people shifting toward more extreme positions. But that's not all, because it's no fun for the people on the other side of the podium either. It can be really hard for the administrators and the public officials. It's frustrating, it's discouraging, it's sometimes even dangerous to deal with hostile, often uninformed citizens at public hearings. And what does that do to us? It can harm our policy and our governance. As the relationship deteriorates between, the people, we the people, and our public institutions, the legitimacy and the financial sustainability of governments continues to decline. This is national data, very well backed up, and it describes the majority of formal participation opportunities in the United States. So, no wonder many of us are kind of sick of democracy, right? Yeah. So it's also hard because many of the basic qualities of just being human make it really easy for conflict entrepreneurs to manipulate us, and it's difficult for humans to make decisions together. So there's a wonderful book, Being Wrong, by Catherine Schulz. She has comically pointed out, she has a great TED Talk on this, by the way. When we, see if this is true for you, we encounter somebody we disagree with, right? We often react on a three-point scale. First, we just assume, oops, we just assume that the person is ignorant. This person needs more information. All right, so we have the ignorance assumption. If it turns out you tell them the information and they still disagree with you, then you move on to the idiocy assumption. Because they have all the information, right? You just gave it to them. And they're too stupid to see it my way, right? So if that turns out not to be true, what if this person that we disagree with has all the information and they turn out to be really smart? Then we have to move on to number 3. They know the truth perfectly well, but they're distorting it on purpose because they are wicked, right? And you'll notice that this latter leaves no room for the most common of human realities, which is that intelligent people of goodwill sometimes disagree, right? And in fact, the only solution, uncomfortable as it may be, is to sit down and hear each other out. And this is especially important at this moment in history, because many of today's hot topics, whether it's affordable housing or school consolidation or citing alternative energy, these are not simply technical problems to solve. These are so complex that they're what analysts call wicked problems. Science can't just give us one right answer, partly because they are full of what's called polarities, which are seeming opposites that actually have to coexist over time. They involve competing identities and underlying values that are in tension. So most problem-solving models, most of the time when we have to solve a problem, we have one of two techniques. We either focus on expertise, right? Bring in the experts, they will tell us what to do, or on activism. We'll just fight, and one side will win, and it'll be over. But polarities and wicked problems are inherently different. They don't respond to technical solutions. And with that win-lose process, they don't stay solved. The losers are going to make sure of that, right? These problems are going to come back. What they do respond to is slow, trusting, face-to-face communication. And that is the reason for tonight's get-together, right? And conversations with neighbors that we hope this will lead to. Because the world, I hate to say it, is full of polarities. Two crucial, contradictory variables that live side by side. And navigating polarities sounds so hard. But here's the thing, you actually manage it every day. How many people in this room are parents? Anybody? Yes? All right. Parents have to be firm and flexible at all times, right? It's like, no sleepovers during the week, except I know your friend is moving out of town and it's Thursday, and well, maybe, okay. Firm but flexible, right? So a good leader has to be both grounded and visionary. Organizations, all the time, have to deal with that tension between continuity, the good things about continuity, and the reality that change is inevitable as well, continuity and change. Right here in our home state of Vermont, since 1788, we have somehow functioned under the paradoxical motto, anybody? Anybody? Freedom and unity, right? Exactly. The ultimate motto of paradox. If each of us is totally free, we can never be unified. And if there were total unity, we could never be free. At least in New Hampshire, they know where they stand, right? Exactly. Boom. Live free or die, right? So our founders had something going on there. So when we talk tonight about town meeting, it's helpful to recognize that there are two good things in tension here, okay? Freedom and unity, two good things. With town meeting, we're talking about democratic quantity, democratic quality, or some would say democratic breadth and democratic depth. We all value quantity. We want broad involvement. We want everyone to be welcome. We want everyone included. And we also value democratic quality. We want deep, well-informed, empowered participation. And I saw that on the flip chart out there when we were making our one-word wishes for democracy. I saw both quantity and quality. We want a democracy that is part of our community fabric. In Jericho, talking with folks over there, I heard someone describe it as we want both democratic access and democratic meaning. Another way of describing this. Broad and deep. So here's one of an annoying fact about humans, is that whenever we feel a tension between two things, even when they're two good things, we end up pitting them against each other. We want to pull away. The human brain really doesn't like complexity. We're wired for a simple good versus evil narrative. So if I have a preference for one or the other, and almost everyone has a preference for one or the other in a polarity, it means anybody who believes the other thing is, what did I say? Uninformed, actually an idiot, okay, probably evil, right? But the, let me just see here, yeah. This finger trap, yeah, the finger trap. So we pull away, and obviously it only traps us further. So the trick is that rather than thinking about solving this polarity like a problem and picking an either or, we need to think about managing it, understanding the values and doing that hard work of finding a both-and solution as we move along. There was a public administrator in California who said that he thought that the voters where he lived saw democracy as a vending machine. Like you put your taxes in here, you put your money in here, and you put it into the machine, and out come the services over there. And that's democracy, and if it doesn't work, you kick it. Like a vending machine. I would propose that in Vermont, we know better than that. We know that democracy is not a machine. It is more like a garden. It's a garden, and it takes tending, and it takes understanding, and it's going to have bugs. And when you come back the next year, there's going to be something up with the soil that you go, oh my gosh, call Charlie Nardozzi, what the heck? Why is it that we expect Charlie Nardozzi to come on the radio every every year with more garden problems, and that's expected. That's normal. Gardens are never done, but we think that democracy is one and done. Think of democracy as a garden. We might be able to be a little more patient and a little more organic in the solutions that we come up with. So that's what I'm going to propose. This is a polarity navigation chart. This is a tool from Brian Emerson and Kelly Lewis at Georgetown University. Very cool work that they're doing down there. And this is kind of a sense-making tool. It's a way to draw a map of our values. So we're going to talk about benefits and overuses. And by the way, they use benefits and overuses rather than pros and cons, because remember, both of these poles are good. It's just that we can over-rely on them sometimes. And when I say quantity, quality, or breadth and depth, and talk with towns about town meeting, they're like, why don't you just say it? Just say Australian ballot and town meeting. Just say it, right? Australian ballot and floor meeting. Why use this code? And the reason is because if we start with those two answers, it frames it as a fight about which one we want, like an either or. But if we zoom out and look at the underlying values that are really getting us hepped up, so that are really bringing us to the table, then it frees us to invent new answers, new models, new combinations of techniques that will meet your needs today. Not the needs of 200 years ago, the needs of today. I've done this work in with about 10 meetings. I mean, we wrote all of those in paper in 2005. We did an update in 2015. So I don't really know how many years that is, but it's a lot. And I've done this kind of work in little towns like Peacham and Craftsbury and Lincoln, and bigger places, Waterbury I'm working with right now, Essex Junction, biggest place in Vermont that's still a town. Actually, just turned into a city. That was their solution. All very different places with unique solutions. But I have found some consistent values. So this is an experiment, and I'd like to see if it overlaps with the folks in Greensboro, Hardwick, and the other towns you might be from. Craftsbury, I think. I'm going to offer some of the main things that I have heard over the years, some of the themes, and after I read each of these quadrants, I'm going to pause for 60 seconds. We're going to have 60 seconds of silence. And your assignment, when I pause, is if you have one of those, hopefully you have one of those little sheets, and if you don't have one, you can get one. You're going to jot to yourself any points that I missed. Like I said, here's what they have, here's some main themes, but is there something that's important and true to you that wasn't mentioned when I did this quadrant? Or is there something that's especially true that you want to add to and emphasize? And by the way, I would challenge each of you to try and stay in the quadrant topic, so that if we're talking about benefits, really think about benefits. What you're going to want to do is go, yeah, but... but there's time for yeah, but later. So really try to give each of these quadrants the benefit of the doubt. Why would Vermonters we know and love, intelligent people of goodwill, believe this? So that's one thing I'm going to ask you to jot in your 60 seconds. And second, I would love for you to be aware of any feelings or reactions that you have when you hear about each of these quadrants. Is there a quadrant where you feel more comfortable, more drawn to? Is there one where you feel frustrated, you want to turn away? That would be, if so, that would be very normal, because we all have preferences. Noticing how you react helps to understand where you kind of live on this map. Okay, so are we all set? It's so cool that you get a Hardwick Gazette pen out of this, too. Yeah. All right, I'm going to start in the upper left-hand corner. And don't worry, this is going to get bigger. But you can see where we are. We're in the upper left-hand corner. This is democratic quality, or depth. Some would say meaning. Some of the things that people value about this: citizens have power as legislators. They can deliberate, they can amend. We can come together, we can weigh the pros and cons, and potentially change each other's mind. We have an opportunity to see past stereotypes. We have the opportunity to see our neighbors as a whole, like a sort of complex people. It forces us to work with people that we might disagree with, and it helps build community. Another benefit is increased public understanding of local issues, so basically informed voting. It's an opportunity to hold each other accountable. The legislative branch, us at the town meeting, and the executive branch, the select board, right? Communication two-way between the two branches of government. And it builds trust and more nuanced solutions. It allows local wisdom to emerge. There's always these speechifying, and somebody, using data or whatever, but there are also people just telling their story. They're like, my basement flooded, and you know that I live right near that culvert. And it's those stories that we've all seen it. A story from a neighbor can shed a whole new light. And finally, improving democratic skills like public speaking and group process. These are things we do together. And these are important opportunities for learning leadership skills. By the way, especially for women, I might add. Women are notoriously underrepresented in other legislative bodies at the national, I think and state level. Not too many women in our House and Senate. A little bit more in the Vermont legislature. On our select boards, often 70% male and higher. Women do make up about half of Vermont's school board members, but Act 46 consolidation eliminated about 60% of the school boards in the state. Oh, snap. But town meeting data tells us that women typically are about half of town meeting participants and are regularly in the majority. Setting the budgets, making binding amendments, raising the taxes to pay for them. Women regularly in the majority is an extraordinary statement to make about a policymaking body in the US. All right, so I'm gonna go back to, oops, it's zipping around on me. Why is it doing this? Okay, anyway, I'm gonna do 60 seconds now. So what I would love for you is to think about just this quadrant, the benefits of democratic quality, and jot down any points that I missed or any points that you want to elaborate on, and also just be aware of any feelings that you have or reactions that you have in this quadrant. I'll give you 60 seconds. Okay, that was our minute. All right, so upper left-hand quadrant sounds, you gotta admit, it sounds pretty great, right? This is Norman Rockwell got written all over it, right? There's a reason we've been doing this for 250 years. What could possibly go wrong, right? So the answer is we could over-rely on these in-person processes. So what we're gonna do now is start complicating the narrative, all right? We are going to look at the overuses, the lower left-hand corner. I'm going to blow up this text bigger. Here's some realities of overuses, over-reliance on a qualitative process like this. Fewer people are involved than with ballot voting. So later on, after the break, we're going to talk about how hard it is to get town meeting data. But as a broad generalization, as we saw during the COVID shutdown, typically you'll get at least twice as many voters with a ballot, sometimes three times or more, especially if you pay to mail that ballot. Especially at a time when we worry about voter suppression. This resonates for many people. No absentee ballots, right? If we've got a floor meeting, you got to be there to vote. So, if a person has a disability that makes it impossible to travel, or they're immune compromised and they can't be in a crowd, or if they're ill, or if their work schedule conflicts, or if they're deployed in the military, or if they're caring for kids or elders, or if they're just out of town. At a traditional town meeting, they can't vote. There's also the risk of groupthink, false consensus. That's, you know what, as a moderator, I gotta say, you gotta be a pretty bad moderator to let that happen. But anyway, it can happen, it can definitely happen. It takes more time. It takes more time and effort. I just wanna say, time is precious, right? The typical floor meeting, 3 or 4 hours. Casting a ballot is much quicker. In Duxbury, they offer drive-through voting, right? In their little fishing shanty there, it's so cute. And you can't do that with a meeting. You can only do that with a ballot. Another important one is that public speaking can be scary. You know, according to the National Institutes of Mental Health, 75% of respondents named public speaking as their number one fear. So scarier than shots. Okay. Scarier than, oh, were we sitting at the bottom? No. Scarier than, oops, what do we do here? Snakes. Snakes for sure. Scarier than death. Really, public speaking is risking a form of death, because we are publicly risking our sense of self in front of other people. Guess what? We might lose. In fact, on a regular basis, on a close vote, half of us do lose, which is maybe just another way of saying that last one, that this process can reinforce a feeling of in-group and out-group. When we have that public experience of being in the minority, losing a vote, it's a lot. So, 60 seconds to jot to yourself any notes. What did I miss? What do you want to emphasize about this quadrant? And be aware of any feelings or reactions you have. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'll tell you in a minute. Okay, that's your minute. And groupthink and false consensus is if you've ever been in a large group, and somebody kind of makes a good point and everybody kind of nods, and then the discussion kind of peters out. There's this idea that it feels awkward to say anything else, and maybe we should just go with it. That's a false consensus. You haven't actually aired all the views, so it risks that when you're in a room full of people and it's not well moderated and there's not a good chance to make sure you get all the views. Things can kind of slide toward a solution that might not be the right one. Yeah. So you can see that when we have this kind of overuse, the pendulum can swing, and you begin to see the attraction of ballots. So we're going to go up to the upper right-hand corner. I'll just blow up that upper right-hand corner text bigger. And these diagonals will start to sound a little repetitive, so I'm going to go through these quickly, but these are important reminders. The benefits of democratic quantity: more people vote, as we discussed. It's quick, easy, accessible for participants. No public speaking needed, woo! Reduce the risk of people feeling intimidated and feeling excluded. Your vote is private. You don't have to say all those in favor, say aye, or raise your hand. And again, allows absentee voting for people who are disabled or ill or have a conflict. I'm going to do a quick pause here. Any points that I missed here? Benefits of quantitative. And be aware of any feelings you have about this quadrant. Okay. Those are some big pluses. That's why, by the way, most of our democracy across the United States is done this way. But there is such a thing as over-reliance on this system. So we'll finish up by going into the bottom right corner. So let me blow this text up. This process eliminates citizens' rights to legislate. This is the deliberation and amendment that happens at a floor meeting. Full self-governance and to hold the executive branch accountable. And you might think, do people really care? But the data is clear. As soon as you remove power from a meeting and it becomes only informational, the attendance plummets. That is some of Frank Bryan's data is absolutely clear. People want power at meetings, or else they would rather stay home and watch basketball. Increases the likelihood of multiple revotes, which are expensive, they're time consuming. People rarely leave a town or school meeting without a budget. It increases the likelihood of uninformed decisions. People vote without hearing, the reports and variety of viewpoints. Neighbors become invisible. When we have a choice, humans tend to gather with people like ourselves. But these meetings bring us together with people who are different from us. And then here's one that often surprises some folks. The idea that ballots can be less inclusive than a town meeting, what could that possibly mean? As I'm sure that you're aware, ballot box voting in the United States is notoriously skewed, to our great shame. Factors like race, income, education level help predict Americans' likelihood to vote. So what about town meetings record for inclusion? Vermont is among the whitest states in the United States. It goes without saying that our town meetings are also overwhelmingly white, but Vermont is quite socioeconomically diverse. And, Professor Bryan assumed that town meetings would behave like the rest of our political structures and exclude certain classes of people. But try as he might with 30 years of data, he could not find a link between a town's socioeconomic indicators, like people's occupation or their income or levels of education, and attendance and participation at town meeting. So the data indicates no systematic socioeconomic bias. And for some people, town meetings are actually more welcoming than America's ballot system. And that is something to ponder, especially at moments like this, when organizations like labor unions, like the Grange, civic groups like the Elks, these are all in decline. These are the groups that used to be the places where people from all backgrounds could build their leadership skills. Skills like public speaking, so that you don't have to be more afraid of public speaking than death. Like being able to lose a vote and keep your head up. Like finding a group process or authentic consensus. White-collar people do this all the time at work, but this is less true for blue-collar folks. Town meeting is often called a school for democracy, and it is one of a vanishing few for non-white-collar folks. And the final one here, reducing public trust. As we discussed earlier, conventional participation, like public hearings, measurably increase polarization, and that reduces trust in government. And a public hearing is what you have. If you switch to Australian ballot, the informational meeting that you have is a public hearing. All right, so I'm going to do 60 more seconds. This is your final 60 seconds to jot any notes to yourself on any points that I've missed, and be aware of any feelings or reactions that you have about this quadrant. Okay, so that, you've been very, very attentive. I really appreciate the thought you're giving this. I can see people's cogs. This was a really quick run through, and I know we could easily spend an hour on each of these quadrants, but I imagine that each of you listening has some feelings about these. So I would love to just take a couple of minutes. I've got some wrap-up comments at the end of this section, but first, before I make those, I would love to hear some of the thoughts that this generated for you. Is there anybody, let's start with the upper left hand. Is there anybody who had anything that they would like to add or amplify in that top left corner, the quality quadrant, the benefits of that? Yes.
It gives us a chance to celebrate the town's successes and also to face for more benefits that are happening.
So would this be a good time for our microphone runners?
Would
to
be a good time for
pop
microphone
up
runners.
and-
Yes. Yes, that would be grand.
It gives us a chance as a town to celebrate town successes and to hold space for any mourning or any other emotions that might come out that we could.
Collective celebration and
Collective.
mourning. Yes, absolutely. Town reports are a great place for that as well. Yeah. Others, yes, right down here.
And if you would, please say your name and what town you're in before you speak.
Ross Connolly from Hardwick. Kind of dovetail with that. It's a privilege.
Can you say more about that? A privilege?
Well, it's a privilege of self-governance that we are accountable to ourselves, and that's a privilege that goes above and beyond just a simple vote in a ballot box at the first Tuesday in November or whenever.
Great, thank you. Other thoughts on the upper left-hand quadrant? Oh, right here. In my town, we have 3rd through 6th graders as microphone runners. They wear sneakers. They absolutely do not know right from left. They have no idea where they're going, but they go really fast. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Jed Pfeffer from Greensboro. So just the opportunity for listening and understanding, which is, communication, but just a little more specific, and just to be able to see multiple viewpoints on something.
Okay, great. Did anybody have any, actually, okay, I'll wait till the end to ask this question, but what I do want to say is that during the break, I made a flip chart that has this on it, and it's got a place for you to put Post-it notes. So if any of you would like to copy some of your most cogent thoughts and pop them on there so that we can reflect and think about them, and also they can be recorded, that would be wonderful. It's a thing to do during our break. All right, so how about this lower left hand? Oh, there's another one? Okay, great.
I was actually going to, sorry, hi, I'm Ellen. I'm from Greensboro. I was going to refer to the bottom left.
Bottom left. Okay, we're moving on.
Sorry. I think the thing that has really impacted my concerns are social media's impact on democracy.
Social
one.
media's impact on democracy.
It's a venue for misinformation. It's a national issue. not just a small-town issue. And I think it has had a big impact. I'd kind of like to be the country that doesn't allow people to political, social, I forget, there is one country, I used to be a political science major, but now I'm getting too old. I forget what country it was, but you can't do any political whatever, media advertising, whatever, a certain amount of time before voting.
Got it, okay, yes. Okay, so the impact of social media on voting, yeah. There's a hand down here in front.
Might be okay without the mic. I was just going to say, Robert's Rules of Order is great, but it also sucks, and we've had to suspend it several times just to get things done. So I think, maybe town meeting day doesn't need to be 4 or 5, 6 hours. So that's my big thing in Hardwick right now is we're struggling with being efficient and making sure people are. We're struggling with being efficient using Robert's Rules of Order. My name's Tyler from Hardwick.
That's a really wonderful summary of Robert's Rules of Order. They're great and they also suck. Definitely. Yes, Town Moderator, I can support that. One cool thing about them is that they can be amended from within. That's a kind of a cool trait, but yeah.
Liz Steele from Greensboro, regarding the democratic quality overuse. Is that the category?
Yes.
Quadrant we're in?
Yep.
I think so. My experience of town meeting has been that there hasn't been so much discussion of issues. There's more people raising a comment or something. And the complexity of budgets these days and the amount of different opinions, often people don't like conflict or in an open forum. And it seems like there's room for an informational meeting which allows people to ask more questions about things and have more discussion around particularly the budget, rather than it just being seen as, this is the budget, are we voting it up or down? That would be my view.
Okay. So you want a richer discussion than what you get from town meeting? Yeah. Okay. Other thoughts on the, yes?
I'm Janet Long from Greensboro, and I believe we had 2 informational meetings before the town meeting, so that's not a problem here.
Right over here.
Let's remember to thank our runners.
My name's Mateo Keeler. I'm from Greensboro. One of the things that I think we suffered from is a sense of alienation because of the tone, and honestly some meanness that's kind of crept into our discourse, which, in the strengths, in the benefits part, I put civic discourse. And in the lower quadrant, I put lack of civic discourse. And, a growing alienation that comes from our lack of capacity to be polite and act with decorum and respect for one another. And I think this is like a societal problem generally, but it's playing out in our meetings.
Okay, great. Okay. No. Because these polls tend to, as you can see, there's some repetition. I'm going to use the last couple minutes to do my reflection. These are excellent points, and I hope that if there are more, that we can capture them with some Post-its out in the lobby, because I learn something new every time I do this exercise. There's a new way of thinking about this. But before we break, I just want to say a few things about polarities, and these are things to ponder as we have our food. There's a signature trait of a polarity, which is that we tend to identify with one pole, and I embrace the benefits of my pole, and I downplay the overuses. And when threatened, I highlight the overuses of the other side. So that's why the colors are the way they are. If I'm a person who really values the benefits, the quality, I'm a person who loves my in-person meeting, I am extremely articulate about how great it is up here, and also very articulate about the downside of the other one. And meanwhile, if you are a person who values the democratic quantity, you are going to be able to talk about that upper right-hand one and be very articulate about the lower one. And you can see the dynamic that this sets up. It sets up a, I'm like yellow, 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 and you're like green, 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 green. Guess what? Totally talking past each other. And so be aware of that dynamic, and be aware of respecting the truth of each of these quadrants, even the ones that we don't prefer. Another tendency is that when things get heated on any polarity, and this can be this one that we're talking about, but it can also be about firmness and flexibility when you're arguing with your husband about taking a trip and he wants to plan it and you want to play it by ear, firmness and flexibility. There's so many ways that we argue about this. A tendency is that we put each other in each other's lower quadrants. So if I am a yellow person, I'm going to put you down here and you disagree with me, I'm going to put you in your lower quadrant. And it really hurts. It really hurts. No one wants to be described as the worst qualities of their own viewpoint. And down here, when we really carry things to an extreme, this is where all the isms are. This is where ableism lives. This is where elitism is. This is where racism lives. We can't live down here. It's painful, and when you try to put me there, it is going to bring out the worst in me. So I would urge us all to be aware of this tendency. Some of the greatest suffering comes from when we treat a polarity as if it were a problem to solve. I just need you to agree with my solution. We try to win in an either-or battle. Yellow wins, green loses, rather than navigate a both-and solution. Again, diagonal conversations can get painful really quickly, and when we feel strongly, we are likely to pull away from each other. And then we get even more stuck. We don't want suffering. I don't want suffering for any of us. What we want is solutions that work. We don't want to be stuck. We want to identify the ways that we can move forward together. So what I'm really hoping for all of us is that we can acknowledge the truth in each quadrant. We can agree that all these things, the bottom things, are true and none of us wants them, and instead of the endless diagonal dynamics, can we focus the conversation in the coming months on the two top quadrants, both of them? Let's ask the question, how can we get democratic quality while also strengthening quantity? What would it look like if we valued citizen power and building community and coming together and democracy, and it also was easy and welcoming for people to participate? This is called third way thinking, called both and thinking. You find solutions you can work on collaboratively. If you can do this, you'll literally feel your shoulders start to lift. These are the kinds of solutions that can actually bring us joy to work on. So when we come back, we're going to look at some communities around the region that have tried to create that third way. I encourage you to, put some of your reactions on those Post-it notes and populate the flip charts, and then at 7 o'clock we'll share some really cool ideas from around the region. Okay? You bet.
So before you all leave, I should have started by saying Susan graciously agreed to condense at least 2 evenings worth of conversation into this evening. So you've gotten a very condensed version.
Fire hose, I think.
It's like, eating your celery soup from the Campbell's can without water. And that's fine, because it's all there and you get all the nourishment, but it might be a little much sometimes. So we're going to go, there's a meal that Annalise has prepared for us in the cafe. And before you go, I'm going to suggest, in the yellow-green or the blue-white way of thinking, look for someone who thinks differently than you and learn what they say. And I'll say, thankfully at the Gazette, I don't have to come up with solutions. I just have to accurately report on what each of you think is the solution. And that's pretty good training, to learn just to listen and not have to say, well, here's what I think. Although I know many of you have heard me say what I think. But tonight, I'm not doing that. So anyway, go enjoy your supper. I hope you'll come back, and we'll hear what other towns have done. So thank you. So those of you who are here, those of you who are here in the room are the beneficiaries of what I was trying to do with this meeting tonight in modeling good meeting behavior. So we had childcare, which one grandmother took advantage of because she's hosting her grandson. So you got to start somewhere, and one is better than none. And I thought that people should not believe or not come to a meeting. By eating, we connect in community, I believe, and it softens us up for each other. So whether it did for you or not, I can't say, but I'm not coming through very well? All right. And I'll also say, and I believe some people said this to Susan Clark over there, that she sometimes moves away from the microphone so you can't hear her. So let's see. The other thing is, I chose this venue because I thought we were going to be able to live stream it with two-way communication, and that didn't happen, but HCTV is recording it, and it will be available for rebroadcast, and so all your friends and enemies can watch it at their leisure. And we're just sort of wasting time for people to show up. But as I said, I believe that people who are on time should be rewarded. So Susan, why don't you just get started?
I will, and I thank you for saying that it's a reward. Oh. It's great. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. Thank you for coming back. That was a wonderful meal. Thank you so much to the Hardwick Gazette and the donors for making that wonderful meal possible. Thank you. Oh, and thank you all for giving such careful thought to the polarities. What a wonky term, right? But the polarities involved in our local democracy. And thanks to those of you who put Post-its on the flip charts, and you can still do that, and you can take time to look those over. So with the underlying values in mind that we've talked about, we can consider a variety of models or combination of techniques that will fit your needs today. Because the most valuable actions that you can take to strengthen your local democracy might be related to your town meeting, but we live in our democracy 365 days a year, so the answer might also include some tools for the other 364 days as well. So, spoiler alert on these, each of these models has pluses and it has minuses. So your job is to weigh these against the values that you've identified. And so again, we're going to hear some inspiring facts. We're also going to hear some annoying qualities about our local democracy. Yeah. A quick review on vocabulary, just so we're all on the same page. The New England Town Meeting is the annual meeting of our town. It is extremely unusual because it is direct deliberative democracy. So it's not a so-called town hall to hear politicians talk. It's not a potluck, although sometimes we do have them. It is self-governance. On issues of finance and governance, every registered voter is a legislator. You're the legislative branch of your town government. That was creepy. Try to make sure that doesn't happen again, whatever it was. So we're making binding decisions about spending, we're making amendments, and we're otherwise taking direct action in our government. We make those decisions in different ways, and the terms that we use matter. So when we're talking about ballots, ballot voting, let's talk about ballots cast. Let's make sure we're using those terms. And when we talk about town meeting, We'll talk about town meeting attendance. Or if you're Frank Bryan and you're actually counting how many women spoke and for how long, then you're actually talking about town meeting participation. So not only how many people showed up, but whether they talked or not. So pay careful attention to those words when we're looking at these different models. An example is the town clerk in Duxbury has been quoted a few times. I've seen her quoted as saying that, quote, "We noticed during COVID that our turnout increased by about 300% because they were able to vote Australian." So by turnout, I believe what she meant was the number of ballots cast was 300% over attendance and people voting at the floor meeting. So under this system, the voter turnout went up. But as we'll see in a couple minutes, their meeting turnout went down considerably. So we'll talk about that. Be careful of the words that you use and you know, pay attention to apples and oranges. So what are Vermont's options by state law? For starters, we're going to just talk about these two basic options. There are lots of tweaks in between, and I'm going to talk about those in a minute. So over on the right is traditional town meeting the first Tuesday in March or the 3 days preceding it, and you elect your officers and you vote on the budget and public issues from the floor. On the left, Australian ballot, or what the rest of the world calls ballot. Like, why do we have this terminology? It's in our statute, whatever. There's a whole story behind it. But you vote in person at the polling place, or you can request an absentee ballot. So some basic facts and figures. As we've discussed, Australian ballot generally gets more voters than a town meeting for all the reasons that we mentioned. It's quicker, it's easier, lots of reasons. As I mentioned, reliable town meeting data is notoriously hard to get. I did have a student dig into the data of 2019 and check with each of the towns to make sure the data was correct. And Australian ballot votes were at least 2 times town meeting attendance on average, 3 times or more if you pay to mail the ballots. Local mileage varies, so do your own careful research. And just a heads up, don't rely solely on the Secretary of State's website data. Use it, but pay attention because there are a lot of glitches in there. It's not their fault. It's just the way that the data gets collected and recorded is, you really got to double check. So some facts about town meeting. Size matters. Okay, town size matters a lot. Smaller towns get much higher per capita attendance at town meetings than larger towns. This is on average. Just to grab a typical year, in 2019, towns of under 2,500 population got more than twice the per capita attendance of larger towns. So Hardwick, on the borderline of being big. And with a population of 2,920 in 2020. It's going to have a little bit of a heavier lift, maybe, than Greensboro, population 811. The actionable lesson here isn't to reduce your population. It's that, right, we're already doing enough of that. It's that communicating about decision-making on a human scale where people can really feel their impact most authentically improves turnout. So town size matters. Another really big one is that issues matter. After town size, the single strongest predictor of attendance is whether there are hot issues on the morning. Town meeting might be sleepy for a few years, and then suddenly you see this spike in attendance. It goes from 15% to 65% or higher. And when you investigate, inevitably, you find that it's because something came up. You know, we're citing windmills or something like that. Ballot voting and meeting attendance both increase with these issues. And by the way, if you're looking at data over time, it also there's always a jump during primary years as well. Those are years that people are paying more attention. And in the fact that a vote is local matters, but not in a good way. So at town meeting in 2019, in Vermont, towns of population of over 2,500, that vote even the ones that voted exclusively by Australian ballot, the average voter turnout, ballots cast, was 21.83%. So it's like 22%. And I know some of you are thinking, hang on, not even 22% of local turnout statewide? That is pathetic. We do way better than that when we vote for president. And I agree, it's sad. Political scientists tear their hair out over this. This is another annoying fact about local democracy. Interestingly, when you ask Americans, who do you trust the most? We trust the federal government the least. We trust state government a little bit more, and we trust local by far the most. But it's also, we vote the least. Unless it's a presidential primary year or there's something really controversial on, turnout for local topics is always far lower than state and national voting. And this is whether it's town meeting or on the ballot. So across the US, ballot voting on local elections averages between 15 and 27%. This is like, you ask people in Chicago to vote on mayor, the things that they vote on there. The point is to keep your expectations realistic. 100% sounds great. It's really unlikely. Okay, we're going to move into some of these third way options. So let's ask the third way question. How can we get the benefits of democratic quality while also strengthening quantity? What would it look like if we valued citizen power and building community and democracy and also offered more options to make it easier and less intimidating for people to participate? So with town meeting, it looks like this. Instead of either or, two options, you go, you expand out to other options. So, I know, this is pretty exciting. They told me I couldn't use sound effects, but anyway. So we're going to start over here on the right. Town meeting with improvements. So you keep your town meeting, but you experiment with improvements, indicated here by sparkles, okay? So in a minute, I'm going to go through a bunch of these. Middle option is town meeting but electing officers by ballot. So this is a hybrid option. And I believe this is where both Greensboro and Hardwick are currently, because you have adopted a third way element. You use your floor meeting for budget and public issues, but you elect officers, or in Hardwick, the select board at least, by Australian ballot. And in this option, everybody in town, it gives them the ability to vote by ballot on half of your government, because keep in mind, this is your executive branch. These are the folks who create the budget, and you elect them by ballot. And you retain the power of the legislative branch. You deliberate, you amend, and you vote at your town meeting on public issues and the budget from the floor. And meanwhile, sparkles, you can experiment with some of the improvements that I'll be talking about. Next, over here, you can switch everything to Australian ballot, but experiment with some of the improvements. Technically, this option really includes 3 decisions, as I think you know. Electing officers is one of them, voting on public questions, and voting on the budget. 3 separate things that can switch to Australian ballot. And moving either public questions or the budget to Australian ballot is likely to dramatically decrease the attendance in the meeting, the basically informational meeting that you have, but especially if you move the budget. There's a bright line there, a bright pink line, because it's a significant structural shift. This is where the power of the people in the town switches from being legislators to being voters who can respond yes or no. And there's another annoying fact that we learned about town meetings, which is, I think I mentioned this, human beings are much more likely to make time for a meeting if there is power to decide at that meeting. So this is very clear from Frank Bryan's data, regardless of how edifying the content. If it's just an informational meeting, data shows that it will get significantly lower attendance. And I'm sure some of you have seen this with some of the school meetings. So, if you want to stay within the typical guardrails of Vermont towns, there they are, your structural options. And we're going to talk about the sparkles Obviously, over here, all the way is just straight Australian ballot with not even one single sparkle. But if you want to experiment and you want to think outside the box, you could go in a whole different direction. You could do something wacky, like do a representative town meeting, or you could do something wacky, like do a two-part town meeting. So these are different kinds of structural options. They're pretty specific, so I'll just go into those briefly first. Representative town meeting. For the past 65 years, every town meeting day in Brattleboro, Vermont, voters went to the polls and they elected 155 neighbors to represent them at Brattleboro's annual town meeting. And those members, they're called members, would have a town meeting 3 weeks later. So Brattleboro just voted to switch away from this system after 65 years, and we can talk about that in a minute, but I just want to be clear, representative town meeting is a super viable system. It's used widely in Massachusetts and Connecticut and all over Switzerland, which is another fun place to study democracy. It's one of several models that Waterbury is pondering right now. So by law, Vermont towns have to have a population of at least 5,000 to adopt this. So for either Hardwick or Greensboro to use this model, you would need a town governance charter. But that's, not insurmountable. And it's not unreasonable. There are small towns with populations of like between 600 and 1,000 for sure that use representative town meeting in Switzerland. Why is it popular? It's because it features all of the advantages of the ballot box, right? Absentee ballots are available, but it also features the benefits of a deliberative floor meeting. The issues get direct public scrutiny. Local officials hear from and respond directly to community members. So we will collect, if you want to jot down any questions, wait a second, come back. Well, we can absolutely come back to any of these models, but I do want to make sure to get through them. So, representative town meeting, something to think about. What about two-part town meeting or even three-part town meeting? In New Hampshire, if a town wants to switch away from a floor meeting, they do not have our Australian ballot option. Instead, in New Hampshire, they can adopt something that they call SB2, which is creatively named after Senate Bill 2, which created it. It's kind of like the high school my son went to, U32, and they just never got around to naming it. Anyway, so SB2. So about 60 towns in New Hampshire use this, and under this system, every spring, the town holds a deliberative session where voters can discuss and amend the budget. It's a town meeting. And about a month later, this budget is voted on by citizens at the ballot box. So absentee ballots are available. So it allows for a face-to-face deliberative town meeting with power, but also a ballot box budget vote for everybody. And it definitely has pros and cons, and I'm happy to talk about those. But in any case, Vermont does not have this system. That said, towns keep trying to invent it. Brattleboro now definitely seems headed in this direction. They're rewriting their charter right now, and the most recent draft features a January floor meeting to debate and amend, and then a spring ballot vote to codify the decision. And they're including a 2/3 required to override the budget passage, so that basically it rewards people for going to the town meeting. And with a 2/3 required to override the town meeting decision. So if this is of interest, Brattleboro is a great, oh my gosh, their charter committee is so brilliant. They just have these really amazing people on it, and they're really fun to talk to if you like this kind of stuff. So anyway, so Brattleboro is one example. But Jericho is another place to look at. They are trying a twist on this. At the 2024 Jericho town meeting, Jericho debated whether they wanted Australian ballot. And what they did was they amended their motion and they said, yes, we want Australian ballot, but we also want a meeting first where we can amend. So they were essentially asking for SB2. So voters voted for an empowered town meeting plus a ballot vote. This is a both and. And like I said, this isn't currently allowed under Vermont law. So in an effort to get as close as possible, Jericho's Reimagining Town Meeting Task Force developed this 3-part process. So they have an early fall kickoff meeting to develop ideas and a vision. And then in January, that is the meeting that looks like a town meeting. And where they're looking at the budget with the ability to amend. And then they have an Australian ballot vote on town meeting day. And the idea is, so the way they do this, because like I said, it's not allowed under Vermont state law, the way they do that is technically that meeting that looks like a town meeting is actually a select board meeting. So at the end of the meeting, the select board votes immediately to approve all the amendments that were made during the meeting participants. So they kind of pieced this together, but pay attention, it's not exactly a codified system. The legislative branch handed their amendment power to the executive with a pinky promise that their decisions will be respected. And so far they have been, but it is risky. So to ensure that this system lasts, a town would need to have a town charter. Again, absolutely doable. So that's another option. All right, let's talk about sparkles. These are some ideas used by communities across Vermont. Every town is different, and which of these will be of most use to you will be influenced by the model that you choose as well. So I think any town can benefit from a committee of volunteers. I'm a big advocate for a Democracy Matters committee. You can name it whatever you want. A lot of the great ideas that I'm sharing here were actually generated by these groups from around Vermont, from Middlesex, from Craftsbury, from Bethel, from a bunch of other places as well. So this is a group that, rather than promoting a specific outcome like, everybody should vote yes and pass the town plan, that's not what these groups are for. These are groups to support democratic process, excellent process, supporting the work of all the elected officials. So no matter what format you use, Australian ballot or floor meetings or a hybrid, these committees can support democracy throughout the year. The idea is not to write a honey-do list for your select board, right? Or your beleaguered town staff. The idea is actually to collaborate with them and support them and support the existing committees.
Can I interrupt just briefly, Susan? This is Paul. We have people from Craftsbury here who I interviewed the other day, and I don't know I'll just speak quickly, but their committee here is creating mock town meetings at the school so that young people get a sense of it and grow up knowing what town meeting is. So
it's one of my sparkles.
These can be, I'm saying you'll get to it then, never mind, I'll shut up.
No, it's great, it's great. It's like, yay, right? It's so exciting. These are the things that pop up when we put our heads together. So these committees can help towns think beyond town meeting to the other 364 days, help change up democratic formats, and we will definitely talk about involving youth. It's a whole category. But they can also do things in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, there's a group called Portsmouth Listens. We wrote about this one extensively in our book, Slow Democracy. It's this band of volunteers who train themselves in small group facilitation, so they're available when there's a hot issue and you want to have rather than, before town meeting, maybe halfway through the year, you want to have a facilitated small group discussion. You've got this band of trained volunteers to support the town on these, whether you're redoing the town plan or moving a school. These are, they can do things like field trips, to the town forest if you need to, or tabling at events or surveys. So these are really valuable skills. I am going to add childcare as its own reminder and thank I love that cardboard room. That is so cool, by the way. The childcare for this event is a really great model. Research absolutely shows that offering childcare can increase participation measurably, especially among women. So different towns do it differently. Ask parents what works for them. It needs to be robust, reliable, publicized widely, and ideally free. Some communities use staff from their after-school programs. Just make sure you don't rely on local moms to do it. They need to be at the meeting, right? And another option can be to offer a stipend for people who need support for childcare or need support for caregiving at home. Maybe they need elder care. So it can be a stipend system, especially with little teeny kids. People may not want to put their kids in a group situation, but so supporting that. If you care about accessibility, volunteer to help your town anticipate and respond to accommodation requests. If you haven't already, your town should name a contact person and publicize how to request reasonable accommodations to participate in town meeting and voting. And you can gather a group of volunteers to work on removing barriers by ensuring that your venue obviously is physically accessible, but also excellent sound system, planning ahead in case someone requests large print materials or sign language interpreters and other elements. I know that Craftsbury has what they call a Hear Here section in the front where the sound quality is better, and I know they're working on their sound system as well. All right, a lot of folks ask about remote voting at town meeting. And that's a question, of course, of accessibility. And in today's Zoom world, many people wonder why town meetings are not hybrid. We discussed this earlier. Town meeting is a legislature making binding decisions. So voter identification is it's paramount. We are voters making binding decisions. We need to check in, and that can be difficult in a hybrid situation. In addition, attorneys are concerned that the statute might need to be changed in order to support remote voting. So it's a really complicated issues, but let me just make a couple of points. Number one, if I were a betting gal, I would predict that the Vermont legislature will fix this soon so that towns can confidently address ADA requests for remote town meeting participation. And I think that for two reasons. Number one, because I know it's possible, because we did it in my town for 12 years. From 2008 to 2020, we were working, Secretary of State at the time was Deb Markowitz, and we were working with advice, and we offered remote town meeting participation to any Middlesex voter who requested it due to health or mobility or issues, or because they were out of town due to public service, like in the military or the Peace Corps. I also know because in Massachusetts, they are doing it now. Any Massachusetts voter can make a request and open a conversation with their town office about reasonable accommodations for town meeting attendance, and that can include remote voting. There's a whole protocol they use, which I would be glad to share with anybody who is interested. But long story short, I think that it is worth all of us getting prepared for this really exciting opportunity. And please don't expect your town staff to do all the heavy lifting. Like in Middlesex, like in Jericho, like in the League of Women Voters members who support their towns in Massachusetts. If you're interested in inclusion, and I saw that people wrote on the flip chart in the lobby, inclusion is something that they were passionate about. You can create a volunteer committee to actually do this work to help your town so that you'll be ready as soon as the statute is changed. And last note on this, you may have heard that Jericho offers remote participation in their meetings. That's because their gathering is not actually a town meeting. It's a select board pre-meeting. So the voters don't technically have any power at the meeting. And so for this reason, they can experiment with fewer legal concerns about voter security and hybridness. And they have a significant remote participation element. So it's a fascinating vision of what a town meeting could look like with 40 or 50 people participating remotely. All right, so we definitely can talk about this more. But a few more points I want to be sure to make. There are a lot of ways to welcome people in, welcoming newcomers. Vermont's population is aging, so physical accessibility considerations, we talked about this, especially the sound system, is going to help different audiences. It's also especially crucial to welcome immigrants and refugees and new Americans, so consider possible translation needs for non-native English speakers. But sometimes people just need to be invited and understand what the heck it is. So like in East Montpelier, they instituted a welcome new voter letter. This is really simple to do. It's just go to your town clerk and get all the people who have been added to the checklist since the last town meeting and send them a letter. Explain to them how town meeting works. I've got some samples that I can bring out here at the end as well. Duxbury is an example. They have switched fully to Australian ballot, but by law, there needs to be an informational hearing before a ballot vote. And while, as I mentioned, these don't always tend to be well attended, some towns try to get more turnout by having a meal or other community elements, adding some sparkles to their informational meeting, which Duxbury does. But the thing that's especially creative about their informational meeting, I think, actually, they also have an informational meeting, but they also have this meeting in January. It's called Have Your Say Day. And the thing about January is it's before the select board has really finalized the budget. So the timing means that the input is given it's in time to inform the select board's final decisions. There's no actual commitment to abide by the will of the meeting, but the Say Day is a time to take in that information. So let's see here. So the number, I've mentioned that the numbers the number of people casting ballots is more than the number who used to attend their town meeting. The estimate was 3 times more. I do have to warn about that replacement gathering, the Say Day. They started it in 2022, and they got about 100 people the first time, which is, I think, from the data that I've seen, about what they had at their town meeting, maybe a little less, but somewhere around that. The next year, it was 80 people. The next 2 years, it was 80. And last year, the attendance was down to just shy of 60. So this is typical of towns that switch from floor meetings to Australian ballot and informational meetings. People come at first to the meeting, but then I think when they realize that the meeting has no power, attendance tends to dwindle. So you have to work way harder to get people to come to a meeting that does not have decision-making power. Frank Bryan's data shows this repeatedly. Positive impact on votes cast, quantity, but negative impact on quality factors, meeting attendance. Highlighting the issues, this is something we can do to improve the quantity of voters involved. After town size, the single strongest predictor of attendance is whether there are hot issues on the warning. I think I mentioned, town meeting might be sleepy for a few years, and then you see this spike in attendance, and you find out, oh, yeah, they had something going on that year. There's always, the thing is that there is always something interesting happening at town meeting. If you care about your town, it's interesting, but we frequently hide it, right? The select board hides it in the budget. It's in there. They don't want you to know necessarily. They've made some changes. Maybe they do want you to know, but it's embedded in the budget. You increase the amount you're paying the sheriff to address speeding, or you decrease the road salt. Your new Democracy Matters committee can publicize these things. Here's what's interesting about the budget this year. They can put that in the media. They can do it on Front Porch Forum. If a select board wants to be really brave, the select board can even separate it out and make it its own article, just to attract attention and make us realize we are doing things here. We're not just passing a budget. We are making real decisions that impact our daily lives. Please come out and tell us what you think. Considering timing is important, by law, you can have your town meeting on the first Tuesday in March or any of the 3 days preceding. This is really going to depend on the demographics of your community. How many commuters, how far do they travel, families versus retirees. Definitely keep school break in mind. You don't want to accidentally back your town meeting into have it be part of school break. But Saturday meetings do work in some places. Marshfield, I believe, has tried Sunday. I actually think Brattleboro was looking at Sunday right now, partly because they want to use the school gym and they have to compete with the basketball schedule. But, some towns discover that people actually guard their weekends really pretty protectively as well. So you can think about these different options. You could also Keep it on a weekday, but move it to an evening. This is something that my town, because we're in Middlesex, which isn't far from a lot of state workers in Waterbury and Montpelier, we have our meeting at 4:30, so it's right after work. It includes supper. Those are all factors, and Professor Bryan's research showed that some towns definitely saw improvement in changing the time. Others saw a reduction, and on average, it didn't make a difference. But it's worth experimenting with. It's worth trying, and that's something you can change from year to year. A few other things that are especially might strengthen your quality issue. Your car comes with an operator's manual. Your stove comes with one. So why not your town, right? Your select board, your planning commission, your zoning, your town meeting, make it transparent. Go online and search Bethel Operator's Manual. Check it out. It's amazing, and it can be. Towns can do this as a printed way or online to reduce printing costs. I've got some samples that I brought, but information is really, really, really important. No matter what structure you choose, reliable, trustworthy information is crucial to voters. Printed, videos, keeping the town website up to date. It's really important to transparency. All can be supported by your new democracy committee. Town report, also really crucial. Any assistance you can offer to the town office, from pie charts to helping people understand content, having photos. This is an example here of a Robert's Rules primer that some towns put on every chair. So that's an option as well. There are a lot of good materials at the Vermont Institute for Government website. Vermont Institute for Government has some samples. You can do trainings on video, so explaining to people, what do these committees do? What types of volunteers could they use? How does town moderation work? These are all things now that people can access. Here's an example that somebody asked me about, voting clickers. This is kind of a cool thing. They're used widely in Massachusetts. I was saying that my son actually, as a birthday present, because he knows me so well, he, as a birthday present, sent me to the Hull town meeting, Hull, Massachusetts town meeting. He stayed overnight. It was really fun. And in Hull, and in, I think, 70 towns in Massachusetts, they use these. You come in to your town meeting, and you get a lanyard with your clicker. So this is to replace traditional floor voting, whether it's voice vote or hand raising or paper ballot. And it is incredibly fast. It allows the floor voting to be private, all right? So no telling people how you voted, and it's very fast. It uses a closed circuit technology, so it's offline, it can't be hacked. And it can also be used if a voter is in an adjoining room, maybe for if they want to participate in town meeting but need to be in a separate room. But it can't be used off-site. It's not something you would bring home. Towns need to buy or rent them. They are expensive, but the sharing arrangements with other towns is possible. Lincoln, Vermont is the first town in Vermont that I know of to adopt them. But I think it's a really interesting, if you're interested in privacy and if you're interested in speed. And I saw the town moderator use them. He was very nimble in whether a particular vote was going to be using that, or if it would be easier just to quickly use a voice vote, he would do that. So you have options. Danville initiated a welcome. They call it their civil invocation, and many towns do use this invocation or some version of it. Many towns, I know ours does, has a newly minted 18-year-old voter read it at the beginning, which is a really beautiful and centering experience. And also having young people there reminds the grown-ups that they are supposed to be the adults in the room. But involving youth, lots of great ideas to do this. And when kids come home telling their parents that democracy is fun, this is such a win. Lots of towns recruit middle schoolers to carry microphones. remembering that fear of public speaking, folks are more likely to speak if they don't have to walk up to the center mic in the middle of the room, if they can stay. But in Bethel, the grade schoolers in the White River Valley School, the Wildcat Cheer Squad, did a cheer routine for town meeting day. 2468, who do we appreciate, right? Voters, which is pretty wonderful. Peacham, of course, has this elaborate partnership between their school and their town, and each grade goes through this democratic process to nominate a name for their town plow, and then the voters vote on them at town meeting, which is, unforgettable for the kids, and it's a lighthearted moment for the adults. I know Craftsbury's Democracy Committee had their students do a sticker contest to publicize town meeting, and Craftsbury also took a leaf out of Woodbury's book. They do a mock town meeting with their students. The town moderator in Woodbury teamed up with their elementary school, and the students got to debate several issues, including whether to spend $500 real decision, on new playground equipment or field trip. Vermont Public did this great story on this, and you could hear the kids arguing about the merits of the long-term investment versus hands-on learning. These are third graders. And in the end, they chose the field trip. And the Fairbanks Museum was so honored that they donated the field trip, right? So then they got to have the playground equipment. I'm not sure what the democratic lesson is there, but pretty cool. We mentioned food. This is a really great time of year to honor volunteers, give awards, break bread. It helps to reduce intimidation and to see each other as individuals, which I think was Paul's point. We did talk about, possible changes in the law, but meanwhile, right now, you absolutely can use public access TV if you have it, to live stream the meeting, or Zoom if you don't have public access TV, so that people can watch from home. Even if they're not participating, it improves information and it increases transparency. So if you do that, be sure to publicize it so people know what's happening. And then just, in order for democracy to thrive, people need multiple points of entry. Not everybody likes meetings, but before anyone will vote on a community issue or go to a community meeting, they need to love the community. So the Conservation Commission can organize a trail building where families bring their kids and some shovels, or the Historical Society hosts a festival where we hear stories and tour historic buildings and look at artifacts. These are ways that we welcome people into community, and by doing that, we welcome them into democracy. This is, by the way, an antique ballot box that they use in Peacham, which I think is really adorable. So cute. Craftsbury is one of several towns creating their own free university. Bethel, I think, kicked this one off. So during mud season, people can offer their skills on anything: how to change a tire, how to identify weeds, how to play poker, learn from your neighbors. It's an important way to bring people together. And I don't think that I need to tell anybody about the Civic Standard and the super creative work that they're doing in Hardwick. They are attracting national attention for their success in reinvigorating community. The point is, to improve democracy, think way outside the box. Build on what is literally our commons, which is our community. We all need good answers. And in the end, Vermonters, I think, know that together, all of us are smarter than any of us. So thank you for your work in whatever direction you take in keeping your communities strong into the future. So that's what I've got, and now we can move on to questions. Thanks.
So, Susan, before we move on to questions, let me first say we did not ask people to sign in or give us your emails because we didn't want the manual work of dealing with that. We will post the link to the HCTV broadcast or rebroadcast in the Gazette we will take the flip charts you've written on and take photos of them or condense them, whatever seems most appropriate, and include links to that or include that directly. I don't know exactly what Susan has in mind with the charts you've been writing on, but if you want to leave those with us before you leave or scan them at home and send them, I'm happy to create a document that links all those charts for people to look through in any way. I don't know how we could, we might think about summarize them somehow. So anyway, we'll do everything to make sure you get back the input that you gave to us tonight. So thank you for that.
Great.
So anybody
right.
have questions?
Like, this was, I said the first half was a fire hose, and I know that the second half was kind of two fire hoses. So, but I wonder if there were any of these models or ideas that stuck in your head where you'd like a little bit more information.
So we also have a new volunteer runner, if anybody who is a runner wants to give up their role. Sylvia is ready to jump in.
Ross Connolly. Have any towns in Vermont, I know some in Massachusetts did, have a quorum call, so they do require a quorum of the registered voters to conduct business at town meeting?
I don't know of any towns that have done that, no.
There's one over here, Jerry.
Liz Steele. I was wondering, in Middlesex, I think you vote by Australian ballot. Is that correct?
No.
No.
We
Okay.
elect our officers by Australian ballot.
You elect your
Oh,
officers.
which is actually, it says on the Secretary of State's website that we do everything by Australian ballot. Example of why you can't trust the data on the Secretary
Okay.
of State's website.
Have you done that for a few years? Could you
We have
describe the
elected
process?
officers by ballot for many years. And, yeah.
And does it work effectively? Can you talk us through the experience?
So we elect our officers, all of our officers by ballot, and we do the budget and the public questions from the floor. We get a, I think for, again, town size matters. For the size of Middlesex population, we get a very good turnout, robust discussion, amendments from the floor. So, depends on how you define, does it work? We combine it with a dinner. We offer childcare. We, like I said, we did offer a remote town meeting for participation for many years, and we really want to do that again as soon as the statute is hopefully we get advice that we're allowed to pick that up again.
So for the elected officials by Australian ballot, did you have an information session beforehand where candidates could describe what they're standing for, or how did that work?
That's a great question. During COVID, we started a candidate web page so that we invited everyone whose name was on the ballot to submit. We used the League of Women Voters model where we answer 3 questions. Tell us about yourself, why you're running, what do you think are the most important issues facing our town today? I think it's something like that. Put those, made those available on the website, and also publicized it quite a bit on Front Porch Forum as well. But we did not have a candidate forum or anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
Could you, just following up on that, is the moderator elected from the floor for the meeting, or the moderator elected for the future? And if so, when does the elected moderator begin to serve?
Yeah, that's a question that we have. There's a town moderator training that the League of Cities and Towns puts on every year, and every year they ask, how do people do this? Because different towns do it differently. In our town, we elect the moderator from the floor. So it's, yeah, so that's the only elected official who's elected from the floor. And it is, that person is elected for that very year. So basically, you are town moderator until you elect the next town moderator. So as town moderator, I start the meeting and then run an election to elect the next town moderator, which has been me for a while. Although I do ask, this year I actually started doing this, I asked the select board chair to run that particular moment of the meeting. But other towns elect their moderator by ballot. Other towns elect their moderator by ballot the year in advance. So when you are checking your ballot, you're electing your moderator for 1 year in advance, which, makes sure that that person has the time to take the moderator training and all of those things. Lots of different ways to do it.
I'm Janet Long from Greensboro. And what is the advantage of the officers being elected by ballot? The only people that ran were people that would have run if we'd had an open thingy. Didn't see any new people running. Just doesn't make any sense to me, but that's because I've been at these things for 60 years. So.
Yeah. Right, there's, like most of these, I think that there are pros and cons, and absolutely a town that elects its officers from the floor is more nimble in that, you can look around and say, hang on a second, we need somebody for, how about you, so you can recruit immediately and take action immediately, so it makes for that fast action. A big advantage of the ballot vote is, as I said, we're talking about two different branches of government, executive and legislative, and by choosing our select board by ballot, you're saying, okay, we're basically splitting the difference. We're saying, we want a both and. We want the legislative process to be in person, but we also want people to have ballot access to our government. And so for all the reasons that we talked about in terms of inclusion and access and absentee balloting, you are having an impact on half of the town government by voting by ballot on who's going to be on your select board. It's your executive branch. They're the ones who build that budget. So they have, it's a very important role. So that's the argument.
Hi, I'm Mary Gagnon from Hardwick. I have a question as to towns that have changed their style of doing town meeting. Do you know of any that made the decision well in advance of the change so that they could keep good statistics as to their turnout in the traditional town meeting, both in the meeting itself and by ballot for a year or two, so that when the new system was put in place, there was hard data to compare? And if that did happen, have any towns ever made a determination ahead of time that if there wasn't a positive change within a year or two, or whatever stipulated amount of time, they would revert to the old format, given that it had proven to be a stronger way to keep people involved?
Wow, what an interesting idea. Actual data collection. I guess a quick answer to your question is my best bet is no. Is that different towns do this differently, but many towns don't actually know specifically how many people attend their town meeting. They ask, as moderator, I ask, is there anybody here who's not a voter? And that's how, the superintendent raises his hand. A couple people raise their hand, but basically we assume that everybody is a voter. Other towns absolutely do a check-in when you come in, and so they know exactly how many people attend their town meeting. Although we don't know how long they were there, unless Frank Bryan and his students are there to say how many people, at 4 different points during the meeting. So knowing what the trend looks like over time, you'd have to do your own research and pay very, very careful attention to know whether that's the case or not. Most of the time, there have been a few towns that have switched to Australian ballot and then switched back again, especially smaller towns. But it's unusual because once you have switched to Australian ballot, then you are voting by Australian ballot on whether to switch back again. Yeah.
Yes, hi, my name's Ellen Selnick. Having had the experience of the year before last town meeting, there were, I think, like 5 additional candidates. And there was a lot of discussion, and people asked questions, and there was, and people got an opportunity to actually do face-to-face. And last year, it was by Australian ballot, and there were no new people. I mean, nobody new wanted to be a candidate. There was some discussion or complaint that they had to get 7 people on a petition. So I do worry, that worries me. The other concern I have, and I brought up social media before, and when you're doing things by Australian ballot, and the information that's coming could be a group of people anonymously sending mailers with misinformation right before the vote, or, how do you counter that? Because the select board isn't going to go there starting, a conflict. We don't want to do that. So, I'm just throwing this out because as many positive things come out of social media, there are concerns for small towns that especially aren't necessarily maybe as savvy as, there are a lot of computer savvy people, I'm not going to say that, but there are some people that if they read a mailer, they think it's true, or don't have a computer to check it out, or whatever. So I bring the social media factor in there because it is a concern. I'm a New Yorker, believe me, I've seen the worst. So that doesn't, and the reason I moved here is to move away from that.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, thank you.
Yeah. So transparency, trust, a really reliable source of information. Getting out ahead, town leaders can get out ahead of if you know something controversial is coming up, having regular posts, whether it's on the website or Front Porch Forum or those kinds of things. It's hard, I know, for select boards to use social media and Front Porch Forum and things like that because there are quorum issues, there's open meeting law issues. But to the degree that you can anticipate the kinds of questions people will have and get out in front, that's certainly one way to do it. It's the kind of thing that volunteers could help with. In the olden days, a lot of towns had their own little tiny town newsletter. I'm not talking about the Hardwick Gazette, I'm talking about the Middlesex Occasional. That's what it was called. With really, and a lot of towns had these little, very micro news kinds of things. But that is the kind of thing that that a democracy committee could pay attention to and just make sure that they're getting information from committees out there. But it's a huge problem, and it's not just a problem in local towns. It's a big problem nationally as well.
We have a person.
Hi, Leanne Harple from Glover. I have a question regarding your prediction that the Vermont legislature is going to change the statute to allow for remote voting at in-person town meetings.
I did say if I was a betting gal.
Yeah. And so I guess what I was wondering is in the states where this statute has been changed and they're now allowing the remote voting, has it, has it shown that more people are now voting in town meeting, including the in-person and the people that did it? Or is it showing that it is taking from the people that were in person and are now voting remotely and slowly chipping away at it? And are there parameters for who gets this, or is it like anyone can make a case and they'll get to vote remotely?
Great question. Yeah, yeah. And all of this, all of this is largely TBD. Because when you think about it, here's something to think about, is when we did remote town meeting participation, like I said, for 12 years, 2008 to 2020, hardly, I mean, think about those years, hardly anybody used, like, we had to explain to people what a Zoom meeting was. Literally, we had to like say, you could do this. And COVID changed all of that. And so there's been this like J curve of acceptance and understanding of what a hybrid meeting is. And with that comes highly, strongly elevated expectations without the law keeping up, and not necessarily with the technology keeping up either, in terms of the kind of things I was talking about in terms of voter identification. There are a lot of moving parts here, and it's very hard to tell what's going to happen. The example that I gave of a place that does this is Massachusetts, and what they do is they offer remote voting for people who request it for ADA, American Disabilities Act, accommodation. So there's a whole process that they use where you have a conversation. And because for some people, for some disabilities, remote participation is the answer. For others, it's not. It might be that they would like a Braille interpreter, or that they would like, sound enhancement, or, there are lots of different ways that we can help include people, and it may or may not include remote participation. But I just went to a workshop, a Massachusetts workshop, where they talked about the number of requests that they were getting. And if you start by we talked about the fact that when you ask Americans to participate in local issues, 25% is high. All right, so start already with the fact that there's a limited number of people who are going to want to participate. And then I think the current data is about 25% of Vermonters have some kind of disability, but whether or not it's a disability that would make them wish that they could remotely participate in town meeting is another factor. So basically, you're cutting the number down in terms of the need that a town will have. What they were saying in Massachusetts was that towns were getting maybe, big towns like 7,000 people, we're getting maybe 6 requests. So it's not like this massive onslaught of number of people who need this, but the people who need it really need it. Let's make sure that they can have it. The question you're asking also is sort of like, well, what if it's not an ADA question? What if it is what we would call universal access is what and that's a dream come true. Everyone can do everything all the time. That's a long-term vision. My take as a town moderator is that it will require new, and this is the Massachusetts Moderators Association take as well. It's going to take a different kind of software in order to make that possible, to have a deliberative body in a hybrid situation. But it's interesting to look at the way Jericho does it. And they have, like I said, maybe 40 or 50 people participating online. And it's a great question to ask. Would those people have come? And I need to read their latest data. My understanding is that it hasn't created this massive shift in number of people who participate. I believe what they've said is we have different people participating, if you can imagine that. But that's something I really want to respect Jericho's. It's a work in progress. They're doing incredible work there, and it's definitely worth checking out their process as they go along and their findings as they go along. To confirm that, that's an impression that I have. So maybe I should stop talking.
All right, well, it's getting late. Let's take one more question. I think we've got, there we go. Maybe two.
My name is Penny Brett Snyder. I grew up in Michigan, and I realize after being here since 1984, I don't really understand why a person would become a select person, or why they would, what they would get compensated for. I'm sure it's not much, but the last question I have connected to this is, you give training for moderators, do you give training for select people when they become a select person? Okay, I would be interested to know what that would be like.
Yeah. The Vermont League of Cities and Towns does training for all the different, well, the Town Clerks Association has its own gig. But yes, town select board members get lots of training and optional trainings to catch up on new things. They also have sort of like monthly updates, like sort of optional meetings that you can go to hear the latest laws that are possibly being changed this year in the legislature and those kinds of things. It's like, why would anyone want to be on the select board? But the town office can be incredibly rewarding experience, and it is it's a beautiful thing that our communities are built on. Again, those leadership skills that grow and the personal growth that happens. I recommend taking a look at, even if it's not select board, maybe you just want to be build some birdhouses for the Conservation Commission, but those kinds of volunteer things can be really richly rewarding. Yeah.
Let me add one bit of opinion here. The Vermont League of Cities and Towns represents towns, not the people who are the legislative body. So it just occurs to me, in adding sparkles, maybe towns could write something that explains what they expect from their select board. So I'm going to ask David Kelly to have the last word here. He raised his hand just as I was cutting.
Very quickly.
Take the microphone, David, please.
Okay. Very quickly, Susan, I want to tell everybody that we're collecting photos and videos of Greensboro in days gone by for a program this summer. And it's a program that the Historical Society and the Greensboro Association is helping with. If you have photos, films, or something that will help us better understand our history, please be in touch with Keisha or with me or with Kyle Gray. That's the first thing I wanted to say. Susan, the second thing I wanted to say is that our school budget is 3 times our municipal budget. And God only knows that the education of our young people is certainly as important as the trucks we buy for the highway department. But it seems that our democratic voice in governance over schools here in rural Vermont, in small towns like Greensboro and Middlesex, has been ceded to large towns. And I'm wondering if you think there's any way democracy can be restored to small rural towns with respect to education and schools.
Damn it, Dave.
I think we need another hour for that one, folks. Thank you, Leanne, from all of us. I'll let Susan say something, but
Oh, my goodness.
I think we really don't have time for
I
anything.
wish that I had a great answer for you there, but I definitely think the awareness of the democratic element. I think that when we talk about schools, we talk about a lot of things. We talk about affordability, we talk about equity, we talk about our children's future. They're all really important, but man, talk about a wicked problem with all of those conflicting interests. And I do believe that one of the problems in our discussions around schools is that when we have those, and by the way, polarities, there's such a thing as a polarity that has multiple poles, not just two. And that's what we're talking about here. And one of the ones that almost never gets picked up is democracy. We talk about our schools as if it's all about the children and the money, but we don't talk about the community and the democracy. So raising that and incorporating that into our conversations, I think, is one way to start that. And I think that the redistricting task force did raise those issues, did hear that feedback from people, did hear from 5,000 Vermonters who said that that was an element of the conversation they wanted to be sure was included. Whether our legislators heard or not is a different question.
I'll add, read my story in Wednesday's Gazette about the Washington Central Unified Union Supervisory District that just had a petition to vote any school closures by the entire voting body rather than just the town the school was in. And the petition was signed mostly by Berlin and East Montpelier voters who want to override the votes of the small towns of Calais and Worcester and close those schools. So this is a thing, and how we deal with it is a hard answer.
There we go.
Thank you all for coming out.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming so much.